The sirens split the night open. Not loud at first, just distant. A faint cry in the dark, then closer, sharper. Blue lights began to flicker against the quiet houses of the neighborhood, turning calm white walls into flashing scenes of emergency. Inside that small suburban home, nothing moved. A mother stood frozen in the hallway, bare feet against cold hardwood, her breathing slow, measured. Her hands trembled, but not with panic, not with fear, with something else. Just weeks before, she had been known as the loyal wife, the one who never missed visiting hours, the one who sat behind thick prison glass, pressing her palm against it as her husband mirrored the gesture from the other side. She whispered promises through static phones, promises of forever, promises of rescue. "I'll fix this," she told him, and somehow she did. The escape wasn't chaotic, it wasn't reckless. It was patient, planned, quiet. Messages slipped through coded letters. Money transferred through distant relatives, a car waiting where cameras didn't reach. She studied guard rotations, memorized weak spots. She became something she never thought she would be, an architect of freedom. When the news broke that her husband had vanished from custody, the city buzzed with shock. Reporters crowded the prison gates. Police launched a manhunt. And she stood in her kitchen, hands covering her mouth, playing the role perfectly. "I don't understand," she said to cameras, tears on cue. Voice trembling, the image of a betrayed wife. But at night, when the lights were off and the children were asleep, she waited. And then he came home, not through the front door, never that obvious, through shadows, through backyards, through silence. For a moment it felt like victory, like a love story against the world. She wrapped her arms around him in the dark and believed she had beaten the system. That devotion had won. But freedom changes people. The man who stepped into that house was not the one she remembered from before the trial. Prison had hardened him, escape had sharpened him. His eyes scanned rooms differently now, always alert, always calculating. His voice was shorter, his patience thinner. The children watched him carefully. At first they were excited. Daddy was home, a secret adventure, whispers and giggles. But children notice things adults try to hide. They noticed the tension in their mother's shoulders. The way she flinched when he raised his voice. The way doors slammed harder each day. Phone calls started coming late at night. She would step outside to answer them. Hushed arguments in the backyard. "We need more money. They're looking everywhere. You promised me this would work." The house began to feel smaller. Neighbors noticed changes too. Curtains always closed, trash taken out at odd hours. The children no longer playing freely outside. Once a neighbor waved at her. She didn't wave back. She just stared, eyes hollow, as if already somewhere else. The children began asking questions. "Why can't we tell anyone Daddy's home? Why can't we have friends over?" She would smile too quickly. "It's just for a little while." But little while turned into weeks, and fear settled in like dust. He grew restless, angry. Every knock at the door felt like doom. Every passing siren made him curse under his breath. He blamed her when supplies ran low, blamed her when money got tight, blamed her when he felt trapped. "You said you could handle this," he snapped one night. She nodded, always nodding, always absorbing. The children heard more shouting, saw more tears. Once the youngest stood in the hallway clutching a stuffed animal, watching as her parents argued in sharp whispers that felt louder than screams. Something was unraveling, and then came that night. It was unusually quiet, no arguments, no phone calls, no tension spilling into hallways. The children were sent to bed early. No bedtime story, no soft kisses on foreheads, just a firm, distant good night. The air felt heavy. Outside, the world carried on unaware. Television flickered in neighboring homes. A dog barked down the street. Somewhere, laughter drifted faintly through the night air. Inside that house, silence grew thick. No neighbors heard screams, no crashes, no breaking glass, just stillness. At some point after midnight, someone tipped off the police about a possible sighting of the escaped fugitive in the area. Patrol cars rolled slowly through the neighborhood. Officers scanned houses. One cruiser slowed in front of hers. That's when the sirens began. Blue lights splashed across the windows. Shadows stretched along the walls. Inside, she stood in the hallway staring at a closed bedroom door, her face blank. Officers knocked, hard, then harder. Police? No answer. They forced entry. The door splintered open. Flashlights cut through darkness. Boots pounded against floors. They expected a chase, a fight, resistance. They found something else. The husband was gone. A back window slightly open, fresh footprints outside. He had left before the sirens reached the driveway. Survival first, always survival. But inside the house, officers found a scene that froze even the most experienced among them. The children lay still in their beds. No chaos, no signs of struggle, just an unnatural quiet. The kind that presses against your ears. And in the kitchen, under harsh white light, she sat at the table, hands folded neatly. Waiting, she did not run, she did not scream, she did not ask where he was. When officers shouted commands, she looked up slowly as if waking from a dream. "He left," she said softly, as if that explained everything. The house that once held birthday parties and school projects and bedtime laughter now held something irreversible, something permanent. Neighbors watched from sidewalks as paramedics moved quickly but quietly, as officers taped off the yard. As the blue lights kept flashing against the siding of that once ordinary home, no one could understand it. She had fought so hard to bring him back, she had risked everything, and now this. In the back of a patrol car, she stared straight ahead. No tears, no resistance, just emptiness. What breaks inside a person to cross that line? What transforms loyalty into destruction? When does love stop protecting and start consuming? That night, the sirens didn't just announce a crime. They announced the collapse of a family built on secrets. And as the blue lights faded and dawn slowly crept over the rooftops, one truth hung heavy in the air. Some choices can never be undone. And this was only the beginning. Love can look beautiful from the outside. Loyal, unbreakable, noble. But sometimes what looks like devotion is something far more dangerous. In the beginning, everyone admired her commitment, even after the arrest, even after the handcuffs, even after the courtroom exposed secrets that made strangers shake their heads. Lies about money, about affairs, about violence that had been carefully hidden behind closed doors. She never flinched. She sat in the front row every single day, spine straight, eyes fixed only on him. When witnesses spoke against him, she stared them down. When evidence was presented, she shook her head softly as if the world had misunderstood the man she loved. To her, he wasn't a criminal. He was a victim. And if he was a victim, then she was too. Friends tried to reach her in those early days. They called, they knocked, they offered babysitting, coffee, support. She declined all of it. Slowly, one by one, the friendships faded. She stopped attending school events, stopped replying to texts. The world outside her marriage began to feel like enemy territory. "It's us against everyone," she would whisper to her children. At first, it sounded protective. A mother shielding her family from gossip, from judgment. But isolation is powerful. The house grew quieter, smaller. The curtains stayed closed longer. The children no longer visited cousins. Birthday parties were declined, sleepovers canceled. When teachers asked questions, she gave short answers, tight smiles. Then came the escape. When news spread that he had vanished from custody, something ignited inside her. Not fear, not panic, validation. She believed it meant he was strong, smart, chosen somehow by fate. She convinced herself the system had failed him and now destiny had corrected it. She began speaking about the future again, about rebuilding, about proving everyone wrong. She believed love had conquered prison walls, but reality has weight, and it crashes down fast. When he stepped back into her life as a fugitive, she expected gratitude, passion, a deeper bond forged by shared struggle. Instead, she met a man shaped by survival. He didn't embrace her for long. He checked windows, locked doors twice, whispered instead of laughed. His touch felt distant, calculated. He didn't thank her. He gave instructions. Keep the kids quiet. Don't turn lights on at night. Stop using your phone so much. Every sound irritated him. A dropped fork, a slammed cabinet, the children's laughter. He snapped quickly, apologized rarely. The house began to feel like a hiding place instead of a home. The children sensed it first. They tiptoed more, whispered when they spoke. The youngest once asked why Daddy looked at her like she was too loud. It broke something inside her mother, but not enough. Because every time she saw tension building in him, she blamed the situation, not the man. He's stressed, she told herself. He's scared. He needs me. But love was shifting into something else. It became duty, then obligation, then fear. Money ran low, supplies thinned. He accused her of mistakes, of carelessness, of risking everything with small human errors. She absorbed it all, nodded, promised to do better. The children became background noise in his world, obstacles, responsibility he didn't want. One afternoon, a neighbor saw the oldest child sitting alone on the front porch steps, shoulders shaking. When asked what was wrong, the child wiped tears quickly and whispered, "Daddy doesn't like us here." The words traveled through the neighborhood like smoke. Inside, arguments were no longer whispered. They were sharp, jagged. A plate shattered against a wall one evening. Another time, a chair tipped over. The children huddled in their bedroom, hands over ears. She saw it all. She saw the fear in their eyes. She saw the distance in his. And still she chose him. She chose the man who looked past his own children. She chose the man who demanded silence over safety. She chose the man who treated their home like a bunker and their family like collateral damage. Why? Because admitting she had been wrong would destroy her. If he was cruel, then what did that make her? If he was dangerous, what did that mean about the escape she orchestrated, about the lies she told, about the risks she forced onto her children? It was easier to double down, to defend him harder, to cling tighter. Love turned into obsession quietly. There was no single moment, no flashing sign, just a slow erosion of reason. She stopped measuring right and wrong. She only measured loyalty, and loyalty demanded sacrifice. Late at night, she would sit at the kitchen table long after everyone was asleep. The house dark, the clock ticking loudly. She would replay every decision in her mind, the prison visits, the escape, the arguments. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, tired, hollow, determined. She began to fear losing him more than she feared losing herself. And that is where everything shifted. Because obsession doesn't just cling, it controls. When he hinted at leaving again, at moving to another state, at finding new contacts, she felt panic rise in her chest. Not because of the danger, because of abandonment after everything she had done. After sacrificing her name, her friendships, her children's stability, he might still walk away. The realization was unbearable, so she clung harder, watched him more closely, questioned his late-night whispers. Once she noticed him step outside to take a call, his voice softer than usual, intimate. Hidden truths. Was there someone else helping him? Another woman, another escape plan? Betrayal crept into her thoughts like poison. She had burned her world down for him, and now she wasn't even sure he would stay. Inside that house, love had fully transformed. It was no longer warm, it was tight, suffocating, desperate. The children felt it most. They moved carefully, like guests in their own home. They stopped asking when things would go back to normal, because normal no longer existed. One evening, as shadows stretched across the walls, he told her quietly, "This can't last forever." 4 simple words, but in her mind they echoed like a threat. If this couldn't last, what would? If he left, what would she have left behind? Silence filled the space between them, heavy, unspoken. And in that silence, something darker began to take root. Because when love becomes fear and fear becomes control, desperation is never far behind. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam a door. The end of everything arrived in a whisper. "We can't stay," he told her. 4 words, calm, cold, final. He said the police were getting closer, that someone had talked, that the neighborhood felt wrong. He paced as he spoke, eyes darting to the windows, fingers twitching at every passing car. Survival had become his only instinct. "I need to move," he added. Fast. She waited for the rest. It came like a blade slipping between ribs. "Alone." The word hung in the air long after he said it. Alone. No hesitation, no apology, no gratitude for the risk she had taken, no mention of the children asleep down the hallway. Alone. In that moment, something inside her cracked, not loudly, not violently, but with a quiet, splintering shift. A fracture you cannot see from the outside, but one that changes everything within. She stared at him, trying to find the man she had defended in court. The man she had promised to rescue. The man she had risked prison for. But the man standing in front of her wasn't looking at her like a partner. He was calculating. She realized then what she had traded away. Her friendships, her credibility, the trust of her neighbors, the safety of her children. She had built her entire world around him, and now he was stepping out of it without even turning back. Without her, without them. The house felt different after that conversation. Quieter, colder. The children sensed it. They ate dinner in near silence. Their father barely spoke. Their mother barely blinked. When she tucked them into bed that night, she lingered longer than usual. She smoothed their hair, watched them breathe. The youngest asked softly, "Are we moving again?" She forced a smile. "Go to sleep." There was no bedtime story, no laughter, just the low hum of the house settling around them. Downstairs, he packed a small bag, not much. Essentials only: cash, a change of clothes, a burner phone. He moved with efficiency. He did not look down the hallway toward the bedrooms. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him prepare to disappear. "Call me when you're safe," she said quietly. He didn't answer right away. He zipped the bag, checked his watch. Finally, he muttered, "We'll see, we'll see." 2 words that confirmed everything she feared. He was already gone in his mind. After midnight, he stepped out through the back door. No goodbye kiss, no final embrace, just a shadow slipping into darker shadows. She did not follow him. She stood there in the silence he left behind. And in that silence, the weight of reality crushed down. She had destroyed her life for a man who would always choose himself first. She had dragged her children into secrecy, into fear, into danger. And now he was free again, free of prison, free of responsibility, free of them. Something twisted inside her. Investigators would later reconstruct the timeline through phone records and forensics. But what happened inside her mind that night cannot be measured by timestamps. It was not rage. There were no shattered mirrors, no wild screaming. It was something colder, a need to regain control. She walked down the hallway slowly. The floorboards creaked under her steps. The children were asleep, unaware of the shift that had taken place in their world. She stood in the doorway for a long time. Memories flickered. Birthday candles, first steps, school drawings taped to the refrigerator. All the ordinary, beautiful moments that once defined her as a mother. But now those memories felt like evidence. Evidence of a life that was slipping away. Evidence of attachments that tied her to a future without him. If he was leaving, then what was she left with? Shame, judgment, prison possibly, and children who would grow up knowing she chose a fugitive over them. The thought was unbearable. In her mind, she began rewriting the story. If they couldn't stay together as a family, then no one would move forward without her. No one would grow up pointing fingers. No one would live in a world where she was the villain abandoned by the man she saved. The house remained silent. No neighbors reported screams, no loud arguments, no sign of chaos, just stillness. When the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, she was back in the kitchen, sitting at the table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. Hours later, police arrived after receiving another tip about the fugitive's possible location. They approached carefully, weapons drawn, expecting confrontation. They found the back door slightly open. They found the bag he didn't take. They did not find him. He was gone. What they found inside the bedrooms would follow some of those officers for the rest of their careers. A stillness that felt wrong. A quiet too heavy for morning. And in the kitchen, she remained exactly where she had placed herself, waiting. When officers demanded answers, she did not resist. She did not cry. She did not ask about her husband. She simply looked at them with eyes that seemed distant, almost calm. One detective later recalled how steady her voice was. "If we can't be together," she said softly, "none of us can." It was not shouted. It was not hysterical. It was deliberate. In that sentence lay the truth. This was not an act of explosive anger. It was not a sudden break from reality. It was control. A final decision made in a mind that believed love meant possession, that believed loyalty meant ownership, that believed if she could not have the life she imagined, no one else would either. She had confused devotion with entitlement, sacrifice with power, and in trying to bind her family together forever, she destroyed them. As officers led her out of the house in handcuffs, she did not look back at the bedrooms. She did not ask where he was. Her world had already collapsed long before the sirens arrived. Some crimes are fueled by hatred, others are fueled by fear, but the most devastating ones are fueled by a desperate need to control what cannot be controlled. And as the morning sun rose over that quiet neighborhood, one truth lingered in the heavy air. He was still out there, free. And she had just made sure no one else ever would be. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful, the kind that presses against your chest, the kind that makes every breath feel heavier than the last. She stood there, hands clasped in front of her, eyes forward. No tears, no trembling, just the same stillness that had settled over her the night everything ended. The trial had moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Phone records, security footage, forensic timelines, statements from neighbors who had heard the arguments, testimony from officers who had walked into that house at dawn and found a scene they would never forget. There was no dramatic twist, no hidden suspect, no grand defense strategy that could rewrite what had happened. The facts were undeniable: 2 children gone, a father who fled before sunrise, a mother who waited calmly for police to arrive. Psychologists took the stand one by one. They spoke in clinical language, words like obsession, dependency, trauma bonding, narcissistic control. They described how isolation can distort judgment, how emotional manipulation can blur moral lines, how identity can become fused with another person so tightly that separation feels like death. They explained her loyalty as pathology, but explanations do not erase consequences. Prosecutors focused not only on the final act but on the path that led there. The choices, the warning signs, the small steps that slowly built toward catastrophe. They showed the jury the bigger picture: the isolation from friends, the withdrawal from family, the children pulled out of normal routines, the decision to help a fugitive escape justice. Each moment on its own might not have looked like evil. Together they formed a pattern of devotion without limits. Her husband was eventually captured in another state, pulled over during a routine traffic stop, tired, unshaven, alone. He asked about her first, not about the children, not about what happened inside that house, just her. That detail haunted investigators. Even in the end, his focus remained narrow, self-centered, detached. In court, he avoided eye contact with her. When their eyes did meet, it was brief, hollow. Whatever fantasy they had built about surviving together had long since dissolved. She watched him carefully during his testimony, searching, waiting for something, regret perhaps, or blame. It was hard to tell. When her sentence was announced, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, there was a soft gasp in the gallery. Family members wept quietly. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse. She did not react. She nodded once as if confirming something she had already known. As deputies led her away in handcuffs, she did not look toward the crowd. She did not look toward him. She walked forward, alone. In interviews after the trial, investigators struggled to explain the case in simple terms. It wasn't just the violence that unsettled them. It was the loyalty. One detective described it as misplaced devotion taken to its extreme. Another said every warning sign was there. We just don't always see them in time. Isolation, emotional dependency, an us against the world mentality. When love becomes a fortress, it can also become a prison. Friends who once tried to help replayed conversations in their minds. The time she brushed off concern. The way she defended him even when evidence mounted. The way she stopped showing up to school events. The way the children seemed quieter each month. Looking back, it felt obvious. But at the time, it looked like commitment. That is what makes stories like this so disturbing. They do not begin with obvious monsters. They begin with ordinary people making choices that feel justified in the moment. She believed she was protecting her husband. She believed she was standing by her vows. She believed the world had wronged them. But somewhere along the way, she stopped protecting the innocent. She stopped protecting her children. Devotion without boundaries becomes destruction. Love without accountability becomes dangerous. In prison, she spends her days in routine. Meals, head counts, quiet hours in a small cell, no cameras, no courtroom drama, just time to think, time to remember, time to sit with the consequences of a decision that cannot be undone. The house they once lived in was eventually sold, renovated, new paint, new owners. Children's laughter returned to those rooms years later. But for those who remember, the address still carries weight. Because sometimes the most terrifying crimes are not fueled by rage. They are fueled by fear of being alone, fear of losing control, fear of facing a world without the person you built your identity around. She surrendered her moral compass piece by piece, first for love, then for loyalty, then for survival, until one night there was nothing left to guide her back. In the end, she did not save her family. She erased it, and that is the lesson buried beneath the headlines. Love should never demand the sacrifice of innocence. Loyalty should never cost lives. If devotion requires you to isolate, to lie, to ignore warning signs, to silence your own conscience, it is no longer devotion. It is danger. As the prison gates close behind her each evening, the world moves forward. New stories, new headlines, new tragedies. But somewhere in the quiet spaces of that cell, one question likely echoes louder than any siren ever did. When did love turn into control? And at what moment could it have been stopped?